I never drag my feet because my grandma taught me how to walk proper to the bus stop. I always finish my dinner because my dad taught me to never waste food. And I always sign off my emails by saying cheers, because when my favorite professor did it, I thought it was simple and elegant. We are all made up of puzzle pieces that came from the people before us. And brands and influencers are built no differently. Hello, my name is Alex, and I'm here with my colleagues Claire, Rachel, and Zach on the behalf of the University of Alberta to discuss Ensemble worldwide. Now, through the recent capture of a major client in Puma, Ensemble have shown that they have finally found a key differentiator to break into the hyper-competitive East Asian agency market, and that is through virtual influencers. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, your virtual influencer in Maya had to be cut short. And now that leads us into our key question, which is moving forward, how can Ensemble worldwide create a sustainable and impactful virtual influencer model? We will analyze specifically the Maya project and then look more holistically at how virtual influencers can fit into the market itself. And we've established 3 criteria, and that it needs to be feasible in terms of resources, it needs to help expand the reach of Ensemble, and it needs to maintain their differentiation. We looked at 3 alternatives. The first is to discontinue virtual influencers moving forward. The second is to continue the current business model, which is to create brand-based personas for every individual campaign. And the last alternative is to shift gears and create more general demographic-based personas. Our recommendation today, we have titled The Influencer Ensemble, where we recommend not only bringing Maya back to life, but introducing 2 new influencers as well. The impact is to expand the team of virtual influencers at Ensemble Worldwide's disposal and have a consistent audience growth of 6.6% per month. Now, let's take a look at the puzzle pieces that have built Maya. Currently, we have the 3 key players that have contributed to building Maya as a virtual influencer. And while this may seem as one team, which it is, the important thing to distinguish is that they come from 2 very different companies that had to join together. On one hand, we have Ensemble Worldwide, which focuses on creativity, on storytelling, and bring a lot of marketing knowledge and experience, particularly in the form of campaigns. On the other side, we have Soman.ai. They are a more technological company that focuses on combining data analytics with behavioral science and use key tools such as the generative adversarial network to combine many real faces to create the virtual influencer likeness. And their strength lies more in combining AI with social media. These 2 companies have combined to create a perfect puzzle for Maya as a virtual influencer. And without one of these pieces, this project simply wouldn't work. Now I'll pass it on to Zach to discuss the SWOT of the Maya project.
Hopping into the SWOT analysis of Ensemble, we can see that first and foremost, Maya is a very important asset, serving as a technological pioneer in the industry. The company is still somewhat small, however, and that does serve as a weakness. However, this industry is growing rapidly, and there is an immense opportunity there. However, it is going to get competitive, and we must act quick and correctly in order to avoid threats. Therefore, a business model change to the virtual influencer has never seen a better time. Next slide, please. Virtual influencers are a big opportunity, and they must be invested in properly. I would now like to welcome Alex to speak more on virtual influencers.
Thank you, Zach. So we have conducted an influence scale analysis, which is essentially looking at the different sizes of influencer audiences and seeing what kind of roles different influencers can play and where virtual influencers can fit into all of this. On one side, we have the micro influencers, which ranges from 1,000 followers to 50,000 followers. Micro influencers' brands are built on intimacy. Their audiences expect more direct communication and their relationships feel a lot closer, which is why their authenticity is based a lot more on the personal values of the influencer, as well as the real experiences they go through. On the other hand, macro influencers comprise 100,000 plus followers, but their brand is built more on spectacle. Because of their larger audiences, they are not able to engage as directly with every single member, and so they cannot create genuine intimacy with their audience. For that reason, we can't judge their personal character, and instead, authenticity of these influencers is based on their consistent image, aesthetic, and messaging. Now, the key takeaway from this is that because on the macro influencer side, there's higher production quality and less of an expectation for one-on-one interaction with followers, this creates a more favorable environment for virtual influencers who may throw some followers off because they are not necessarily a real person. When they are looking on the big scale, this simply isn't as important. Now I'll pass it on to Claire to look at our criteria and alternatives.
So now that we've worked backwards to evaluate the market, we have established key criteria to assess how Ensemble can effectively move forward with a sustainable virtual influencer model. The first criteria is asking if it's feasible for Ensemble to implement the given amount of capital and people needed. And next, looking at how they can expand their reach to desired engagement levels. And lastly, looking at, does it maintain your differentiation in a competitive market? So using these criteria to analyze our alternatives, we'll look at the first one of discontinuing the use of virtual influencers. While you will be saving on investments, it does not push the company forward at all. And because the agency industry is competitive, you risk falling behind. Continuing your current model of developing brand-based influencers like Maya will let you maintain your differentiation because you're one of the only agencies that has virtual influencers. However, it doesn't expand the reach to the desired extent because as we've identified, virtual influencers work best in the macro influencer realm, and having a new influencer for every brand would have you starting from scratch each time. And lastly, we look at developing demographic-based influencers. So essentially, this would be creating a persona one time that can hit multiple different campaigns and can be used with different brands, instead of creating a new entity for each brand. This would allow for better engagement with target audiences and see more reach being expanded as a persona's own personal brand is further developed through more focused efforts. So based on the criteria we laid out when trying to address the question of how can Ensemble seek a sustainable virtual influencer model, we recommend utilizing demographic-based influencers. And now I'll pass it off to Rachel.
So we know that the influencers for each demographic are a good idea. We know that it's a good idea to head into this direction, and we know that it's a great idea to continue using Maya. But how profitable is this influencer marketing space? So currently the global spend on a base case grows from 2.5 billion to 11 billion in 2022 in Southeast Asia and Eastern Asia alone in the most growing sectors, which is fantastic news for us. Going forward, we can look at 2020's projected 0.87 billion. This is 870 million, all the way up to 1.28 billion. This is a fantastic space to get into with a virtual influencer, and Alex is going to tell us exactly how.
So now we're at our recommendation today, which we have titled the Influencer Ensemble. This implementation comprises of 3 key puzzle pieces that will set you up for success with your virtual influencers. Our first puzzle piece is to bring back Maya. Since the early cancellation of the Puma campaign, your current virtual influencer Maya has been dormant, and waking her up is key to getting the ball rolling once again. We then recommend setting up a joint venture with Soman.ai because they were key to developing your first virtual influencer. And if you're looking to invest further, it is key that you have a steady long-term relationship with the company. Lastly, our talisman piece is the Influencer Ensemble, where we will look not only to build Maya, but capitalize on her success by expanding your virtual influencer team to 2 additional influencers that can target different segments in different markets. And now I'll let Claire walk us through the first step.
So stage 1 of the implementation is centered around rejuvenating Maya and bringing her back to her platform. But why are we bringing Maya back specifically? First, Ensemble has already invested in her creation, and she is an entity for the company to use how they like. As well, she was specifically designed to have wide reach of the entire Southeast Asian market. So when first starting with this step, there will likely be 2 key challenges to be mindful of: the Puma contract and creating Maya's own vision. When she is brought back, there will still be around 2 months left of the Puma contract. And as she was initially created with the purpose of being an ambassador for Puma, it's important to fulfill those commitments to keep that business relationship positive. After the contract is completed, however, the focus will be on infusing more storytelling into Maya's posts to start developing her more as her own person and to start furthering her individual brand. Currently, she is a projection aligned with the Puma brand, but we want the focus to shift to the Maya brand, leveraging employee strengths of storytelling to give Maya personality and start establishing more of her qualities. So highlighting different hobbies she enjoys, food she likes. This will all play into growing Maya as a more relatable person that can better connect with her audience. As well, incorporating more background and life into Maya and her platform will create the avenue to continue capitalizing on her reach to keep her climbing up the ladder to attain macro level influencer status. After taking time to really build up the Maya brand, and after amassing more followers, you can then start to look at how this newly built platform can be leveraged to secure more brand deals that are better aligned with Maya's character.
So what does Maya's growth look like? So in the two boxes at the top, we have our key assumptions. On the most left side, we have the micro influencers, and in the bracket is the industry standard. We are picking a low to medium dollar value, as you can see, at 200, 2,000, and 7,000. Our second assumption is in the next box, and this again is our base case. So due to the fact that Maya had such exponential growth when she was first put into her platform, we wanted to predict that this would also happen given the fact that she has established already her platform. So we have put a 21% growth rate for the first 6 months, like we said, quite high. Next, for the growth in the medium term past 6 months, we want to bring it back to an industry standard that ranges between 6 and 8%, which is why we chose 7. And we're thinking about doing 5 posts on average a month so we don't dilute her brand. So below, I did a month-by-month calculation for 2.5 years. So what you see here is a very condensed version of it. Starting at present, she has 8.2 thousand followers, and we can see by her growth rate that she will continue to micro status until January 1st, 2023, in which in January 1st, 2024, she will head into mid-range, which is between 50 and 1,000K, and in macro earlier in the year, so about 6 months past January, so August, to get her into the macro status, which is where you really start getting those revenue dollars to showcase this investment. So here at the bottom, we have a total amount of revenue in 2.5 years of $320,000 for Maya. So exceptional place for Maya to be, especially as she is coming in as one of the first virtual influencers that could definitely grow this platform for you. So next piece of the puzzle is to go into a joint venture. So currently the business relationship with Somin AI is very strong, but Ensemble needs to capitalize on this relationship even further to be able to develop the ensemble that is coming next. So taking a look at the cost structure of this right now, we wanted to highlight your attention to the right side of the slide, which says professionals needed. Unfortunately, the rest of the costs get cut off. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to read the list of costs that we have forecasted for you. First, it starts with the lawyer's contracts at $250,000. Next, we have 2 AI investments that we have projected at $200,000 in total. Next, we're anticipating some new hires to create some content. So at $50,000 each, we are planning for 2 at $100,000. Additionally, Somin AI might need to add a developer for this project at $50,000. And lastly, is a brand relationship to go seek out those partnerships if needed at another $50,000. So totaling besides legal fees for you is $400,000, with Ensemble taking most of the risk. This is so that Ensemble can enjoy most of the benefits. So in creating this joint venture for this virtual influencer project, it's really key to set a proportion of profits that goes to Somin that is equal to the risk that they're taking on. So at this present moment, we are looking at taking on about 87.5% of the risk. And so that will be a key player in the negotiations and the contracts. So going forward, what synergies will these bring?
Thank you, Rachel. So looking at the intangible strengths of both of these companies, we see that Ensemble is a more creative marketing firm, while Somin is a more technologically driven marketing firm. And by combining these two companies' strengths, their synergy is the ability to make an accurate and complete virtual influencer, as they've already proved with Maya. Looking at revenue synergies, Ensemble worldwide, mostly works within campaign marketing and focus in industries like petroleum and technology, while Somin are a content marketing firm that focuses on social media. By combining these two partner strengths, they are able to target new markets in new areas and grow each of their companies. In terms of cost synergies, these two companies have offices in different countries. They have key teams that tackle different issues. But what we see as a similarity is that they both have to have data analytics team. Now, by creating this joint venture, they can reduce the size, they can reduce their costs by reducing the size of the data team within Ensemble and increase info sharing with Somin.ai. And just want to clarify, we have put merged in green, but this does not mean a merger. This is showing what is possible with these two companies combining their skill set for this particular project only.
Entering the final stage of implementation, we will bring two new virtual influencers to the market to put the final piece of the influencer ensemble puzzle together. Next slide, please. Beginning, we must first ask the question, what does Maya not do? Firstly, she does not focus on any specific sector. Additionally, she does not identify with any specific demographic. Next slide, please. Before we aim to implement this, we must know with certainty that Ensemble is ready. Ensuring long-term growth for Maya will ensure viability for the future. Adding 1 to 2 more consistent brand partners will ensure revenue streams, and integration with Somin.ai being complete will ensure we have the technological capability to do what we set out to. Now that we are ready, we must assess the most profitable targets. Regarding sectors, the sector most of interest to current Ensemble audiences is fashion and clothing, and it also represents the section that Southeast Asian households spend the most on after essentials. This would be the most ideal section to target one of the virtual influencers for. Moving into a demographic-based target, we look to both ethnically Chinese and Mandarin-speaking populations across Southeast Asia. These both represent very large and very important, far-reaching demographics. However, they are also deeply connected, and we aim to merge them in order to get a far-reaching yet tight-knit community, which will further connectivity to the audience. The 3 things that must be put in place to finalize the influencer ensemble is to first reassess and confirm that there are no external factors that could have swayed the analysis of the sectors. As it is a substantial amount away from now, things may change. Nextly, we will build both the story and the AI behind the influencers. And lastly, promote using Maya's following and the new accounts created for the influencers. The costs below signify a due diligence that was paid due to the COVID. However, this has already been factored into the company.
Perfect. So we have a list of 5 KPIs that we would like to measure throughout this process. However, I would like to draw your attention to number 1 and 4. So first, we would like to see that growth rate about 6.6% per month consistently, meaning that we're consistently reaching those new audiences through the Maya brand and then further through the Ensemble brand as well. Additionally, new followers gaining 3,000 in the first 4 months for the additional 2 ensembles. And this is so that we can start to generate that revenue for Ensemble right from month 4.
So we have identified 2 key risks, but we can come back to this in the Q&A.
The timeline will begin with stage 1 taking 6 months, with stage 2 beginning at the same time and taking 1 year and 8 months, stage 3 beginning at 2 years and 2 months and concluding in 2 years and 10 months.
Now, to conclude, we have shown you that every real person is built by the puzzle pieces of the people behind them. So by setting up the correct puzzle pieces, not only behind Maya moving forward, but behind future virtual influencers, we can set Ensemble Worldwide up to finally break into the hyper-competitive Southeast Asian marketing agency market. By making sure that our virtual influencers are not only positioned at the right size of influence, but on the right topics, in the right timeline, we can ensure that Ensemble Worldwide can capitalize on Maya's initial success in the long term as well and become a dominant marketing agency, not only Malaysia, but hopefully moving into the rest of Asia as well. Thank you, and we'll open the floor to some questions.
Thank you very much, University of Alberta, for your presentation. I'll now look at my colleagues to change the timer to the 15-minute one. Yes, so the timer is set. Judges, please ask your first question.
Hi, I have a clarifying question. Firstly, a great presentation, well done, and also well done doing it within time. I think it was all well coordinated. Really good job, folks. One of your puzzle pieces is this merger, and I'm finding it, my provocation to you is it feels like a distraction more than real value. How would you respond to that?
Absolutely. So I will start it off, and I saw that Alex is probably going to take a qualitative piece of that. So just to confirm, apologies in the misleading language, it is not a merger. So since there was already an established relationship between the two companies, all we're looking to do with something that we've called a joint venture is to further solidify that partnership through contracts. And that is the whole premise. And the reason we wanted to show this to you is to showcase the long-term impact and synergies that could be achieved through this partnership.
So it's just a purpose joint venture. It's not a merger as it says on the slides.
No, that was
okay.
I did mention that in the presentation that we said the word merged, but that was in terms of what happens when their strengths merge together for this specific project. Additionally, like the joint venture is mostly there to solidify a more long-term partnership. Maya was always designed to be 8 months long, and so it was less solidified. And so moving forward, if you want a more perpetual strategy, it's important to create some sort of contractual agreement so that it can be a long-term partnership moving forward.
Can you go back to the financial projection slide, if you don't mind?
For the financial projections, there are three. So there are the financial projections for the industry, there are the financial projections for Maya herself, and then there's also the cost projections. Which one would you like to see?
So yeah, there's revenue forecast one. Sure. So my question around this is there if you had to overlay the cost forecast on this, what would a PBT projection look like?
Certainly. So this actually extends through about 36 columns. So it is quite condensed as a forewarning. So at this point in time, the break even with just Maya is about 4 to 6 years. And while that seems very long, this is the base case. In the best case, it's 3 to 4. Additionally, another thing to overlay with the cost is the fact that the total revenue that we're bringing in is about 320,000 from Maya alone in 2.5 years. The investment is a total of 400,000, yes, but it does not start until year 3. My apologies, year 2, which is when the development process will start. And once the development process has started, we will be able to bring in some revenue from the new Ensemble as well. So while Maya does not cover all of the costs associated with this investment, it is an investment into the new structure of the influencer model.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my first question is kind of a follow-up to what Suresh has just asked, and that is, what is the rate of return on your recommendation as a whole? Because it's not quite clear. This is just Maya on this page, or does this include the expectations for the development of 2 more influencers?
No,
and I'm just trying to understand, how much do I need to invest up front? And when I look at the PBT, the cash flow of that, what does that look like? So I can understand what kind of return I'm getting on my investment.
Certainly. So I will answer the first question, which this is just Maya's projection. So we are hoping to grow the others as well in their more niche segments, so they won't probably hit that 7,000 per post threshold, they will stay more tiered towards that 2,000 threshold. So that is the first question. In terms of return on investment, I think it would be prudent to look at this holistically. And while I do not have that on a slide, if we were to look at the return on investment within the next 5 years, assuming a similar growth rate to Maya, we would absolutely have a positive investment due to the fact that the upkeep costs are only 50,000, which is the salary, in years past year 2.
Okay, and you talked about the risks and mitigant. You kind of say, well, we'll get back to that in the Q&A. Can you talk a bit about that? What do you see as the key risks to your business case, and how do you mitigate them?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So with a whole part of this implementation relying on that joint venture with Somin, a key risk is coming from them not being interested in creating that long-term partnership. However, this can be mitigated by looking into new companies that offer their similar strengths to Somin and keeping a list of that when first talking to Somin. So you can have that as a backup plan as a worst case scenario. However, we do believe that as there already is a working relationship, this would be a very last resort option. As well, another risk we identified is being unable to add 1 to 2 more consistent, bigger brand partners before the start of the stage 3 implementation. And to help mitigate this, efforts should focus more to developing partnerships with local brands to start building up those portfolios before then trying to get in with those bigger brand partners later on.
And I have one more question, and I'm sure Amit has a number of questions as well. But you're talking about developing a group of 3 personas, Maya being one. But how are you going to target the other 2? I mean, is this going to be? Are they going to be focusing on particular industry sector? Are they going to be focusing on particular age group or a particular nationality? I mean, how are you going to target the other 2?
So there are 2 main niches that we're going to focus on, one for each of these new influencers. The first one will be the fashion and the clothing industry, as they represent the most profitable sector to tap into right now. And examples of how we could create this content to then capture this market is making pieces that relate, showcase, and enrich the community in which they're involved in. This also applies to the ethnic Chinese / Mandarin language speaking demographic target, wherein due to their niche nature, they are more interlocked with one another and bound by their similarities. Therefore, when we speak upon those, make content relating to that and advertise it, we're fostering a stronger community, whereas Maya was a generalized approach that had multiple sectors that she was open to. It is defined which these 2 virtual influencers, their sections they are working in and what they will be enriching.
Just to quickly add on as well, an example for the Chinese language influencer is specifically, for example, you could target the travel industry very well because there are so many countries within that region that speak it. It is very easy to take this virtual influencer, place them in different areas, create travel blogs, create guides. And mainland China, it represents one of the biggest population of people that will travel that area. And so the travel industry is a really good way to target, is a really good place to target that Chinese language influencer as well.
Amit, I think you're muted.
As usual, I mute myself. Never tend to unmute myself again. So it's a related question. You can stay on this chart. You had at some point shown an analysis around macro versus micro. I'm sure you had internal discussions around it. So I just thought it would be nice to hear more. I mean, logic one of the logics tells me that because this is an automated platform, what's the harm in creating millions of multiple micro influencers and having a few that are macro as well for long-term sustainability? But what were the conversations that you were having before you selected what you wanted to select?
That's a great question, Amit. Thank you. So the main thing that we discussed when looking at micro versus macro influencers is that micro influencers are a lot more personal in a sense. When somebody has 1,000 to 2,000 followers, they're a lot closer to their community. And so the whole idea of a virtual influencer might feel alienating in that space because, well, I'm interacting with a person, but it's not really that person. And maybe they have life experiences, but it's kind of a character. Meanwhile, the macro influencer, we related it closer to like a TV character where we know there are people behind these characters. We know that their stories to an extent have been manufactured, but that doesn't keep us from liking them because we do not personally interact with them. And so we don't feel linked to them in that way. It's more of a presentative, performative sort of type of influencing where it matters less if the person is real or not. That was a real consideration that we had to take when making sure that virtual influencers were going to be successful, is that they wouldn't feel weirdly disconnected. And by having a large audience that doesn't expect much one-on-one genuine interaction necessarily with that person, only in small blips, we figured that the most effective way to normalize virtual influencers was in this bigger audience space.
And to answer the second half of that question on what we see the growth with influencers being, absolutely. I think we all spoke in the room about being able to expand this ensemble to an even larger ensemble. However, it always is important to nail it before you scale it. You don't want to have too many personas on your hands. And for that reason, we think that it's important to take them on a growth journey from micro to mid-size to macro influencer. And so it does take time.
So in one of the charts, when you look at new influencers, you talk about a growth rate of say 3,000 followers a month. Typically, the whole world of social influencers doesn't follow such a sort of flat growth rate. It's like a race car. You has tremendous acceleration at the top and then a float down. You didn't consider that, or you consciously didn't speak about it?
Absolutely. So one of the considerations came from my personal experience. So that has been a driver in this. For the company that I worked with last year, we had a very sustainable growth pattern like that. So it was certainly myself who had brought that portion into it. However, so that was the approach we took for the second two. However, you're absolutely correct. We saw Maya have that exponential growth, which is exactly why we did do a sensitivity analysis to see just how much growth she could pursue, which led to much higher revenues, closer to about 600,000. To relate it back to cost, it would cover all of the costs in 2.5 years.
Okay. Any reason why you, on this chart, which is up right now, you sort of restrict yourself to Chinese? Any particular reason to, while I get the logic that you're making in terms of demographic audiences, but you also tend to restrict the interacting audience that you are chasing, especially when you're only talking of Maya?
When we looked, go ahead, Alex.
No. Take it.
Very quickly, I would just like to add, when we did analyze the main demographics, important demographics, trend-setting demographics in the industry, both the ethnically Chinese tastes and the taste of those that spoke the Mandarin language across Southeast Alberta or Asia were one of the most influential demographics. However, they both constituted very related content. So by merging these two together, we can create a very far-reaching, however, very concrete in its connection audience.
Sounds good. I'm done.
Thank you, team. I don't think we have time for another question and yet another answer. So thank you very much for your presentation. We will now move you to a waiting room. The judges will deliberate and we'll call you back for a feedback session. So thank you again, and I will see you in a few minutes.